We learned this week of a new school of diplomacy to go alongside such niche disciplines as panda diplomacy, ping-pong diplomacy and elephant diplomacy, all of which are things which have happened. We learned specifically of golf diplomacy. A weirdly satisfying sound effect that. Can I get some general muttered agreement?
I think so.
Let's have it again. Now we're all having fun. We learned that South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, preparing to visit his US counterpart Donald Trump, had determined to appeal to his host via the medium of golf, a game at which Trump has cheated for many years, winning along the way several prestigious and imaginary honours.
This week, Donald Trump proudly announced that he had won 2 of his own trophies at his very own golf course in a single weekend. Wow.
All the while nobly refusing to allow his focus on the game to be broken by such inane, trivial frivolities as, for example, the ceremonial return of American service personnel killed in a training accident overseas.
Our own president was not present to receive their remains in a ceremony known as the dignified transfer when they arrived at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth filled in for America's commander-in-chief, who chose instead to travel to Miami for a Saudi-funded live golf tournament at his own course.
We learned that, as a consequence of all of the above, President Ramaphosa had enlisted the support of top South African golfists Ernie Els and Retief Goosen, and had bought Trump a big book about golf. Let's have a hefty tome landing on a table with a resonant whump. Sadly, however, it didn't work. Aww. Well, quite. We learned that President Trump had resolved to give his guest a piece of his mind, for we learned that President Trump is not, despite what may have been assumed from his rhetoric and actions, entirely indifferent to the tribulations of poor huddled masses yearning to breathe free, etc. But we learned that with a world of trouble to choose from, Trump found himself moved by, and for some scarcely imaginable reason, white South African farmers, and by golly, he had printouts of newspaper articles to prove the extent of their plight.
Death of people. Death. Horrible death.
We learned, however, when we looked such things up, because we're good like that a President of the United States is arguably venturing onto thin ice when he takes a pop at anyone else's country over violent crime, on the grounds that you are statistically more likely to get shot in New Orleans, St. Louis or Detroit than in Johannesburg, so there's that. Also, in the final quarter of last year, while 6,953 people were murdered in South Africa, a horrendous toll, no doubt, one was a white South African farmer. So we learned, again, for some scarcely imaginable reason, Trump had become strangely fixated on one particular demographic. We learned, however, that though President Ramaphosa was a model of restraint throughout Trump's harangue, which was at one point illustrated with a video of inflammatory monologues by an eccentric opposition politician whose party won a single-finger percentage of the vote at South Africa's most recent election, a chap can only bite his tongue so long.
I'm sorry I don't have a plane to give you.
I wish you did. I take it. I would take it. If your country offered the United States Air Force a plane, I would take it.
Still, future visitors to Trump's White House, should there be any, have now learned that the entry-level bribe is one aeroplane. In literary news, meanwhile. We learned of an exciting slate of holiday reading to which to look forward via a summer supplement in the Chicago Sun-Times, bristling with capsule reviews of new titles by big hitters including Isabel Allende with Tidewater Dreams, apparently her first climate fiction novel, and Min Jin Lee with Nightshade, a riveting tale set in Seoul's underground economy, it says here. We learned swiftly thereafter, however, that clearing space on our bookshelves would be lamentably wasted endeavour, as we learned that neither title nor many of the others enthusiastically blurbed by the Chicago Sun-Times actually exist. Aww. We learned thereby, and earnestly hope others learned therefrom, something of the folly of outsourcing any aspect of journalism whatsoever to AI, which we learned was exactly what some idle hack cranking out copy for a syndication farm had done, without bothering to check whatever twaddle the machine cranked out, still less, actually doing the goddamn assignment like a professional taking elementary pride in their labours. We further learned, and earnestly hope publishers do as well, that though experienced human sub-editors do tend to want paying, they're pretty good at preventing your title from beclowning itself in this fashion.
I think so.
An encomium we reserve the right to retract next time they cut one of our extremely amusing jokes. Still, we learned that the hapless scrivener responsible for the fictional fiction can console himself that he was not the only American rumbled skipping the work this week, as we learned that US Secretary for Homeland Security Kristi Noem should arguably have spent less time shooting puppies and more time boning up on the basics.
So, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to...
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
Or maybe leaving everything to the machines isn't such a bad idea after all. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Mueller.